So when we're talking about pit beef, what we're looking at is a certain slice of meat. You're talking top sirloin, uh, any type of sirloin roast or anything like that you can use for pit beef. And when I think of pit beef, I think mainly of Baltimore and the pit beef sandwiches they do there. There's a big difference between those and a French dip sandwich or a roast beef traditional sandwich. These are very special. So what we're going to do today is we're using a top sirloin or a sirloin tip roast, and we're going to go ahead and prepare that. Before we do that, I'm going to talk about our rubs. When you talk about rubs, you're going to want something that has your salt, your sugars, some garlic, some cayenne, things like that. So if you're wanting to make those, or you see our later lesson on how to make your own rubs and sauces and things like that, you're more than welcome to use those. But what we're using today is some commercial rubs that we have found that have worked really well and we've had really good success with. So today I'm going to be using a Smokin' Guns Heat hot sauce or hot rub. I'm going to be using the Slabs Wow Up Your Cow, and I'm just going to use just your regular Worcestershire sauce that you can pick up in the store. And we're mainly going to be using that Worcestershire sauce as a glue. And what I mean by a glue is I'm going to be putting that all over this piece of meat, and then I'm going to be putting our rubs on there. Again, remember with rubs, you're not going to do as it says and rub that into the meat. We don't want to do that. We don't want to clog up the pores of the meat. You want the resins and the spices in that meat to emit and to mix with the natural juices of this meat and be drawn down into it to act as a marinade. And so that's what we're going to do today. I always use just one plastic glove on one hand, one free hand without a glove. That way I don't gunk up my bottles and everything and make them all slippery. Any of the tools that we use today, what I'm using is just your basic serrated knife. I'm always using a spatula, and I use a pair of tongs. The reason why I use these tools is that they're a lot easier to use and to manipulate things on the smoker. But it's also that I don't want to pierce or poke this meat and have the juices and everything that are in it run out and lose flavor and dry out the end product. It's very important. So remember, one of our big no's is do not poke the meat or at any time do anything that would cause the juices to flow out of it. After we go ahead and we prepare all this, I'm going to allow it to sit for at least 5 minutes before I put it in the smoker. I want some of the juices to react to the spices and the rubs that I am going to put onto the meat. You'll see that just prior to us putting it on the smoker. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and prepare this. When I'm looking at this piece of meat, you're going to want at least choice meat. You don't want to get select. Select is going to be your last resort piece of meat. It's going to be a tougher piece of meat. It's not going to be as well marbled. There's not going to be as much flavor. And when I talk about marbling, what we're looking at is these strands of fat that are running through the roast. And that is where your flavor is going to be. So if you look at this piece of meat, there's not a lot of fat on it. There's not a lot of trimming that you're going to have to do on this particular piece of meat. Now I may have something like this that I'm going to go ahead and just simply cut that off so it's not hanging. All right. But with everything else that I have here, we're looking pretty good. So I'll go ahead and do that now. You don't have to use Worcestershire sauce. You can use Heinz 57 sauce. You can use any other type of marinade that you like. We prefer to use the Worcestershire sauce. It gives it a real subtle flavor and it just adds to the spices. So I'm just liberally going to put this on my piece of meat here. Go ahead and rub that all the way around so we get that nice and wet. And then I'm going to go ahead and start with one of the rubs. Now I always use a combination of 2 rubs, and the reason for that is that each one of them has a different flavor profile and brings something different to the table. And when you mix the 2 of them together, they do something really special to that meat. But what we're wanting to do with the pit beef is we're wanting to build up a crust. You're going to want to get a crust on there. Traditional pit beef is going to be on a charbroiled grill. It's going to be cooked hot and fast, and it's going to build up that crust. With this being in a smoker, we're doing low and slow most of the time, and so we're wanting to be able to build that crust. And so by adding that wet element to the meat and then putting the rub on it, we're going to build up that crust. So we'll go ahead and add our first rub to that. Don't be afraid to go real heavy with this because you're, like I said, you're wanting to build that crust on there. You want to have that crunch It'll be a very special element when you're making your sandwiches, and when we put those together later, you'll see how it comes together. So you see we've got that pretty well coated. I'm going to go to my second rub. Go ahead and add that on there. And you'll see as I'm putting that on there, there's different colors. And that's what we're talking about, just the different elements that each one of these rubs brings to the table that's going to add even more flavor to that. Now, there are some rubs that you're not going to want to add to your meat. Okay, you're not going to want to necessarily add cinnamon to your rub, things like that for beef. When you think of beef, you're thinking of beefier flavors. And most of your rubs that you can get, both commercially and in the stores, they're going to say that they're specifically for beef. When you smell these rubs, the first thing you think of is beef. And so that's what we're going to use today. So again, just put my Worcestershire sauce on here. Making sure it's good and wet. Again, adding our rubs. Making sure that you always remember to get the edges of your meat as well. You just don't want to put the rub on top and forget the edges, because you want to build a crust on the edges too. With pit beef, when we get this done, we're going to be cutting this really thin and making up our sandwiches. This is great for football season if you're wanting to do some sandwiches that are really quick, easy, and have a really good flavor to them, and that people are going to remember you want pit beef. Guarantee you do this, you're going to be wanting to do it again. So again, second element, we're adding that second rub to this. Again, make sure that you get your edges. Get them all covered. And it's okay to go heavy on the rubs here, because that's what we want. We want to build that crust up. So this is where my spatula comes into play. Go ahead and put that there and move it over to my pan. Now I'm going to let that sit for about 5 minutes before I put it on the smoker, and we'll show you that here in just a second. So we've allowed our pit beef to sit, like we were saying, for about 5 to 10 minutes to allow the spices and the rubs to mix with the flavors of the beef and the juices that are already there. And I just want to show you, before we put this into the smoker, how it looks right now. And you can see that juice that's flowing from this pit beef, okay? That's just the mixture of these rubs in the beef itself. That's why you don't really need a marinade. If you have a good rub and you're putting it in there, that's all you're going to need. So before I put it into the smoker, I'm just going to do another light dusting just to cap it off. Like I said, we're wanting to build a crust on this pit beef. Same two rubs that we used again. The slabs, wow up your cow, and smoking guns hot is what's going on these. Okay, so we have that. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and put that pit beef into our smoker. I have my temperature probe that's on the pit beef. What that's going to do is it's going to give me that medium rare reading that we need at 140 degrees. Between 135 and 140 degrees is what we're looking for. That's the only time that I'm going to poke this meat, and I'm not going to do anything else with it. And the reason for that is I don't want to have to keep opening and closing the smoker and losing our heat like we're doing right now. So I'll go ahead and close that up. Once that pit beef gets up to 135, 140 degrees, come back, take it off. We'll tin it in some foil, let it sit and rest for about 5 to 10 minutes, let those juices slow down and go back into the meat. And then we'll slice it and we'll have some pit beef sandwiches. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take the pit beef off. It's at temperature right now at 138 and 140. We do have a smoked meatloaf in here, but what I want to show you is with our pit beef what's happened. You can see that the juices have come out of the beef and it's mixed with those rubs and the resins within the rub. So what we're going to do now is we're going to transfer it over to our aluminum foil. We're going to tint it, wrap it up, and allow it to rest. And what that's going to do, it's going to allow these juices that we see on top of the meat to be reabsorbed and go back into our pit beef. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off. Again, using my spatula. So I'm going to move this up just a little bit on my foil. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and wrap this real quick. I'm just using one layer of foil. I'm going to fold it over. Go ahead and tint up one side of it like that. And with the other side, just make a little pocket and just take a regular beef broth. You don't need to put a lot in there, maybe half a cup to put in there. And so I'm going to let that set. I'm going to let it just allow the rubs and the juices and everything to flow back into that meat, so then when we take it back out and we show it to you as we're slicing it, you're going to see that it's going to be dried up and all that liquid's not going to be on top like what it was. So what we did is we've allowed the pit beef to rest and for the juices to settle down in the meat. So what we're going to do is go ahead and remove that from the foil and go ahead and start slicing it so we can eat here. So the key with pit beef is that you want to slice it as thin as you can. If you have a hand slicer, that's great. If you just have a knife or a slicing knife, then you can use that and you can go ahead and do it really thin. And so that's what I'm going to attempt to do here, is just start slicing this as thinly as I possibly can. Ideally, you can allow this to rest overnight in the refrigerator. Just leave it wrapped in the foil and let it sit overnight. It'll be a lot easier to cut. It's always easier to cut cold meat than it is hot meat. Now the closer we get into it, the more rare it's going to be. Obviously, because this is an outside end, but you're going to have people and guests. Some people are going to like it medium rare, some people are going to want it more well done, but I guarantee you it's not going to really matter once they taste this if it's going to be medium rare or if it's going to be medium or well done or whatever. It's the flavor and the work that we put into this is going to pay off here in just a second. So you can be pretty generous with this when you start doing the meat. So I've got enough cut there that I'm going to go ahead and make a sandwich and show you what it looks like. So what I've got is I've got enough right now that I can go ahead and make us a decent sized sandwich. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. So what I would do is I go ahead and take my plate, get a bun, I'm going to go ahead and open it up. And then what I do is I'm going to take that beef. I'm going to just layer it onto that sandwich. Traditionally, when you have a pit beef sandwich, what you're going to do is it's going to be served with just sliced onion on top of it. You can put as much or as little as you want. It's going to add to the experience. If you want, hey, you can throw a slice of tomato on there as well. But what I would do before putting on that tomato is I'd go ahead and put some Worcestershire, or not Worcestershire, but what I would do is put some horseradish sauce on there. The horseradish sauce just adds to the flavor and the intensity of it, and it's more of a traditional type sandwich by doing that. You can make your own, you can buy a commercial brand. This is a really good commercial brand if you're looking one, which is basically just the Beaver brand. It's a horseradish cream. It's really good. You can go ahead, since this is pit beef barbecue, throw some sauce on there too. And then grab yourself a tomato, lay it on top. Close your sandwich up. And that's how we do a pit beef sandwich. Hope you guys tune in later. Check out some of the other videos that we're going to have. and the lessons that we're going to teach you. I think it's going to help with your experience, and in turn your backyard experience and love of barbecue is going to increase. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you again later.